Okay, so this is part two of my reactions, and I'm gonna um, to module three, and I'm gonna go a little bit more directly and just relate to. See, I've written a bunch of notes down and just relate to these notes. Also, try to keep it under 15 minutes. Um, Part one has been truncated, lost about 4 minutes when it got uploaded, so I'll re-upload it again tomorrow. Hopefully, this will work out better. So we've been talking about all the different sort of ways of surveillance and news surveillance, and you know, surveillance is always improving. It's a moving target. We can now have surveillance in your cars, and this hacking of cars is really scary that people could take over. You could have surveillance coming out of medical devices that are doing RFID, and how that's scary on the one hand. On the other hand, um, that would be pretty cool if somebody's driving through my neighborhood and I could just sort of slow them down and say, you can't drive through my neighborhood at 70 miles an hour. So, what goes on with these technologies is there's an upside and a downside. The question is, how do we go about making the rules? How do we figure out what we really want to do and what's right? Because these technologies are going to be constantly pushing the envelope, pushing the envelope, pushing the envelope. So there was some talk about, surveillance for people on probation or parole or sex offenders. And with sex offenders, it was like, hell yeah, people are on parole. So at a different part of my life, I worked with people in prison, and a lot of times people on parole and probation, the way it's set up, they can't actually adhere to the rules and regulations of their probation and parole because they can't find work or they can't find a place to stay. So they have to go out of area to do that. And if you're surveilling them, then they get caught and go back to prison. So it says, yeah, we should be able to track these people and they should have to adhere to the conditions of their probation or their parole. But if we look too closely, that also can be a problem. That could be a problem. And then, and this goes back to the conversation from part one, where he's saying, well, CCTV seems all right because it's fixed and stationary, but that could be discriminatory in where it's placed because the more surveillance you're under, the more likely something will be found if people are watching and people are surveilling. And are you only going to go to the videotapes after a crime is committed, or are you just going to watch somebody have everybody what Foucault called it the panoptic vision? That is sort of the strategy of prisons is to make sure everybody's under surveillance at all time. At least everybody thinks they're potentially under surveillance at all time. That's prison. That that's the exercise of total control, which goes back to is there some place in our life that the state or some other actor doesn't have control of our lives? I'm going to go faster on this. On the other hand, just to stick with the surveillance thing, um, now with iPhones and we're seeing all these brutal police killings and that kind of thing, or we saw the tape of Trump, all of a sudden these issues that people know exist and have talked about are in front of our eyes. So seeing also has this possibility by making these not private, by making these episodes public, it could have a huge social impact. In particularly, I'm thinking about hashtag Black Lives Matters that, people have known forever that African Americans are treated differently by the police than white people are. White person's privilege, but you could talk up the wazoo about it, but when you see it, it's hard to deny. And then Doug, of course, brought up the whole idea we can surveil our own house now. We put ourselves under surveillance. And a lot of people talked about, what do you do with children on the internet? And I know when I was raising my kids, we said we're not going to have them under surveillance. Just my youngest. My oldest was, Facebook came along. She was a freshman in college, so um, she wasn't it. But with my youngest son, who's in college now, we decided on purpose not to put him under surveillance. There's something to be said that you have a private life apart from your parents at a certain age. We don't all want to live in the Truman Show. And now a lot of people talked about this new industry of reputation management. And, you know, my timer went off. Gotta get that going back again. Of reputation management and going and proactively trying to defeat these algorithms so nasty information about you doesn't circulate up, isn't easy to find, or is taken down. And that's crazy on certain level that you have to aggressively work to preserve your reputation online. And then it's interesting with the mug shots, which is really horrible on the one hand. On the other hand, it used to be that the reason that those were public records is that protected people who were arrested, that you had to produce who you were arrested. You can't arrest people in secret. And now that's flipped. So maybe we have to redefine what a public record is or how certain information should be made public. But there's a benefit to people who are arrested that their arrests are public because so they can't just be arrested and put away. A lot of people talked about how the internet produces um, the algorithms of the internet, the computer nature of the internet produces this private information that can be painful. People pass away and that kind of thing, birthdays, whatever. Well, this will be interesting because I accidentally stopped recording and now I'm going to see if I'm recording another clip. So to go through, I only have about 5 minutes left, and so to go through the rest of the points, um, we're talking about private information. So I just had an experience just today of a colleague of mine who I've just started work with. Don't know him very well. His mother passed away, and I saw that in the via Twitter actually, and I was able to offer my condolences. It was kind of strange because there's no way without that I would have known. Even with working with him, he really wouldn't have shared that. We're not working along those lines. Um, it was interesting that some people felt that millennials, and there was that Pew study that said millennials um, are more concerned about their privacy because it seems that they're less concerned about their privacy to most people and way overshare and that kind of thing. And the whole development of apps like Snapchat seem to be predicated on the ideas you don't want to save stuff, you want to have things disappear. But then, of course, Morgan brought up the idea that maybe some of the stuff about us shouldn't be allowed to disappear, that should be part of the public record, whether we want it or not. So once again, so the new technology is forcing us to rethink the issues that we have with public and private record. It's really, these are what we have to think about, and how do you make those definitions, and legally how do they make those definitions? People said, can public figures control anything about their life? Well, say J.D. Salinger, a novelist, probably most of us know Catcher in the Rye, he successfully sued people from using his private letters until he passed away, and he might have stipulations on them even now. So there was a way, even if you had once been in the public eye, to remove yourself from the public eye.